We'll get started if you may then. So welcome everyone. So my welcome includes welcoming Guy Dakin, who's one of our governors, staff governors. So welcome, Guy. And I'm not sure, do we have anyone else observing, Julie?
We have a lady who's a prospective NED who has to join us. I'm not sure she's joined yet.
Okay.
She may join later.
Okay, and apologies?
Mahmouda.
Okay, thank you for that.
And it's her last formal board meeting.
It is, and I'll say a few words at the end just to say thank you. Declarations of any other business? Declarations of interest? Minutes of the meeting of the 11th of April, any corrections? Okay, action log and matters arising. I just got something here. There was a piece about beds, and there was sort of no date. I just find it. Page 37. It was about on the performance report. The FIT was going to receive an update on the project on reducing average length of stay, and the comment sort of leaves it's a bit open-ended. I don't know if anyone can help with a date at some point on that. Don't know who I ask. Do you know, Sally? Oh, Julie, I mean, not Sally.
Yeah, I'll find out and say I
think it'd be useful to have a date, so we just got a scale.
No, absolutely.
Okay. In which case, we're on to quality section, item 6, patient story. Debbie, shall I hand over to you?
You can very briefly. I will just introduce Marie and Nadine. I will leave them to introduce themselves, but they are going to talk to us about we've heard quite a bit about, and we know was originally on quality concerns register because of staffing, so I thought it'd be really helpful to hear a little bit about that this morning, and so they'll tell you a little bit about the service and also a patient journey for us. So without further ado, I shall hand over, Marie, and leave you to pick up the reins.
Thank you, Debbie. So my name's Marie Duffield. I'm the service manager for the CAMHS Rapid Response team. Thank you for inviting us today.
You're welcome.
Nadine?
Morning, I'm Nadine Dekel. I'm the clinical psychologist within the Rapid Response team and the intensive treatment team.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just sharing. Can everybody see the presentation? It's up.
Yes, thank you. Well, I can.
Okay. So we've got a few slides and there's an opportunity for questions at the end. So I'm going to give an overview of the service and then the Dean will talk about the patient story. So just to give you a bit of an overview of the service, essentially we're a crisis service for young people. We're Berkshire-wide, and we are now split into 2 teams. So we have an assessment team and we have an intensive treatment team. So it's a bit similar in some way to the adult model of kind of having the PMS service and also the crisis home treatment teams. So our assessment team will do that. Essentially, they will assess young people who present to us in crisis, often in the acute hospitals. So they will provide same-day urgent assessments, and they may then also follow the young person up with a one-off appointment to review their risks, review what's going on, and make decisions around what is needed next in terms of their care plan. Sometimes they will do some multi-agency work as well as part of that, and sometimes medication may be considered, although that's fairly rare. And the assessment team will only do no more than 3 patient contacts because their role is purely to assess and provide that responsive service. We now have the intensive treatment team, which has only been formally live in the last sort of 8 months. So it's a brand new team, and their role is to provide intensive treatment to young people for up to 8 weeks, because what we identify was many young people that present in crisis, they can't necessarily, they need help right now, and they need an actual piece of work that's obviously intensive, and not always, there's obviously, as everybody's aware, there are wait lists around, so some young people can't be on wait lists and they actually need some intensive work. So this team was set up to provide that intensive, but it is short term, although it's intensive, and then sometimes they are referred to longer term services, and they'll provide group work for young people, individual work for young people, but also we do a lot of work with families, your parents, carers, for example. Often they need support. We do a group for parents as well. And the aim of kind of doing this is obviously to reduce risk, to kind of enhance the young person's safety, make sure that the care plan needs are identified, and we always want to try and prevent Tier 4 admissions. So we do a lot of positive risk taking and really trying our best to keep young people out of Tier 4 acute hospitals, and as well as mental health hospitals, because often it's really not helpful for them to go there. We do also get some internal referrals from other CAMHS teams, as well as those that present out in the community. In terms of our hours of operation, we predominantly in the week we operate, majority of the staff will work till 8 o'clock in the evening, with one person working slightly later till 10, and the intensive treatment team are more of a 9 to 5 service. However, we are piloting a 24-hour service now, but it's just in the West in terms of assessing young people that present to the Royal Berkshire Hospital in Reading. So we have one clinician based there who will assess young people through the night, and generally they will always assess 2 or 3 people through the night, which is brilliant, because then it reduces, rather than those young people being admitted to a paediatric ward and then waiting for us parents having to stay overnight, waiting for us to open the following morning. Instead, they're assessed, discharged home straight away. So that pilot is really, really successful. Royal Berkshire Hospital is our more busier hospital compared to Wexham Park hospitals, hence we're trialling it in the West first. In terms of our staffing, we're quite a big team now, which I guess is a shame to actually say that in terms of the actual needs of young people that are presenting in crisis. We now have 35 staff in total. We have staff that work across both the assessment team and the intensive treatment team, but we've essentially got about 10 actual clinicians, 10 to 12 clinicians in both the assessing team and also the intensive treatment team, as well as the admin staff as well. In terms of our referral information, last year we had 1,150 referrals, which averages out just under 100 a month. We're generally very, very, very quiet in the school holidays, and we're much busier through the winter. We're very busy. Exam pressure is always a time that we're busy as well, but the referrals rapidly decrease through the school holidays, which says a lot. At least 3/4 of our referrals actually come from the 2 acute hospitals, Royal Berkshire Hospital and Wexham Park. So typically our referral sources, they will refer to us, and usually what's happened is the young person has presented to hospital because they've taken an overdose. That's the most common reason, but also if they've have self-harmed in any other types of ways, or they're suicidal, they will often also come to us. But the most typical route is an overdose and they've gone to the acute hospital. Many young people that present is due to, I've put on their systemic factors, so meaning actually, the family issues, school issues, peer relational issues, past trauma, etc. That is often what we are seeing. That's the actually underlying reason why they present. And we find roughly 60% actually need medical intervention. So what that means, often they are given treatment if they've taken an % of young people actually don't require any attendance. We do our best to try and keep people out of going, preventing them from going to the acute hospital, because actually many don't need to actually go, but it seems that parents seem to just take them there even though no medical treatment is needed. They might be suicidal, and instead they could have contacted our service directly. Okay, so in terms of how we actually view self-harm, the way that we actually work is to actually look at the underlying reasons why a young person has presented in crisis. So we don't overly focus on the actual self-harm, the behaviour, and just trying to stop it. Of course, we do look at safety planning, obviously looking at making sure the young person is kept safe, but the key thing is to make sure that we actually understanding why they've gone into crisis, because often the young person's behaviour, risk behaviour, is really a response to what's going on for them. So whether it's school issues or family issues, etc., going on at home. And obviously, if we address those reasons, that in itself will actually reduce the young person's risk. So we obviously do work on actually reducing self-harm, but it is around actually understanding what is going on. And in terms of, I did do a recent audit in terms of service evaluation, and what we actually found was roughly a third of young people that actually present to us present due to actual school issues, and roughly a quarter that present to us is actually due to family issues. So therefore, it's really important that we actually understand those underlying needs, what's actually going on, and often that really indicates we need to involve other agencies in the work we do, because if there's school issues that are creating the self-harm or family issues, actually we need to meet with the schools, meet with the family, do some work with the families, etc. So we do at least 50% of the young people we see end up having some form of multi-agency consultation with agencies. So I think that really highlights that actually although these young people are presenting in crisis, it's quite rare that it's actually due to a mental health disorder alone, and less than half actually need a CAM service. And I've put the last bullet point is just making that point again, that it's futile to actually work on self-harm when the underlying causes are not actually addressed. Okay, so I will now hand over to Nadine.
Yes, so the patient journey we'll be looking at, we'll refer to the young person as Laura. And it actually adds on quite well to the last slide that Marie just explained to you. So Laura was assessed by the Rapid Response Assessment Team in October following admission to RBH because she had an impulsive overdose with the intention to end her life. And this was triggered by being placed in detention due to a conflict at school. So throughout the treatment of Laura, it was quite evident that all her distress was triggered in the environment within school education. She was then referred to ITT, the intensive treatment team that's also part of Rapid Response, by the assessing clinician, because they thought it might be beneficial for some short-term intensive treatment regarding some emotional regulation work, some DBT informed work, and to teach her some skills to regulate her emotions better. So she was accepted for individual sessions, and then also we referred the parents to our parent group that's 6 weeks weekly, and the parents could attend that in order to gain some skills on how to support Laura better. So we had 8 one-to-one sessions. It focused on DBT skills and some positive behavioral support, and we also did a session around safer self-harm for her. And we further shared appointments between our team and with psychiatry as well. We got our consultant to also review the young person so that we could get a better understanding of the formulation. A lot of the time when the young people come to us, like Marie said, there's a lot more going on than just self-harm or just the overdose. So it's very important for us to do a piece of work to get a proper formulation of all the difficulties the young person is experiencing. So just in summary, some of the things that Laura was experiencing is there was autism, emotional dysregulation with self-harm and suicide attempts. possible ADHD was identified, and we had to do the necessary referrals to get that assessments done. She had harmful eating behaviors that started at the age of 6. There was language and communication difficulties, possible dyspraxia and dyslexia, and quite a lot of childhood adversity. She comes from a family home where mum has mental health difficulties. Mum has been an inpatient in the last few years with borderline personality. She has a stepdad that is also on psychiatric medication. So it became quite evident that her home environment was also quite unstable. And then when she was attending school, she could get triggered quite easily at school because she felt very overwhelmed at school and not supported at school. And this could also be due to neurodiversity. So it's very common with cases like this with Laura that it appears to suggest mental illness or mental health difficulties, but we soon found out that this was actually not the case, and this presentation is linked with the stress produced from the unmet developmental and educational needs that she was experiencing. So our intense therapeutic interventions over the last 5 months did not really result in improvements for emotional change or functioning. So we quickly identified that we need to do a lot of multi-agency work. You can do the next slide, Marie. So the role of our multi-agency workers, we had to set up meetings with education. We shared a letter with them recommending some reasonable adjustments within the school, requesting increased support. We requested speech and language assessments and an educational psychology assessment for dyslexia and dyspraxia. We also then did a mass referral to social services. They were involved a few years ago, but we re-referred due to the clear struggle that the parents were having to manage with Laura, and also because we identified some struggles the parents themselves. So social care came involved. And thus we had weekly multi-agency meetings with education and school and CAMHS ourselves. There's also currently the young Laura is on a child in need plan, so social services are involved. We did a local area emergency protocol meeting to avoid a tier 4 emission. Like Marie said, we do try to avoid tier 4 admissions, especially with a case like Laura when there is also neurodiversity. That won't be the environment that we would want to send her to because she'll be very overwhelmed. We also then have regular transition meetings with our specialist CAMHS team, who is the longer term psychology interventions team. Although at this stage therapeutic interventions aren't successful, it was important for us to liaise with our specialist community team. So once all these unmet needs have been addressed, that she is ready to access some longer term therapy. We also did a referral to our key working service. That's quite a new service in the West. So the key working service was set up to support young people with neurodiversity, such as autism, and to do these multi-agency work for them. It's sort of the young people that we often find that don't fit within a specific pathway due to autism, and they need extra support and a lot of multi-agency work. So Laura's always also been referred to those services. And like I said, then we've been liaising with the ADHD team to do an in-house assessment. We are getting the autism assessment expedited. And then we've also suggested to social care for a youth worker and a family worker to promote more routine and activities for Laura while she's at home. So there was joint home visits conducted between psychiatry, social care and school to put in a plan in place for her to return to school safely, although she's refusing school quite often. And then we also recommended an educational healthcare plan, an EHCP, that school needs to put in place to also address the needs for her to feel more supported at school. There was also a referral made to occupational therapy to understand the sensory profile a bit better. So this is quite a good example of a patient journey where we started with a therapeutic intervention, but very quickly realized that no therapeutic intervention will be successful due to all the unmet needs within the social environment and the educational environment. At this moment, we are still currently in meetings with social services and school, because there still is quite a lot of difficulties for Laura at school and a lot of self-harm at school, and we still feel she has not found the right provision for her within a placement or educational setting.
Okay.
And I think that's us.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Most interesting and thought-provoking presentation. I'll hand over to colleagues. Aileen.
Hi, yeah, that was really interesting, and you've obviously do some marvelous work with the people that need it. I've got loads of questions, so I won't I won't steal everybody's questions, but briefly. So Laura was obviously very, very complex in terms of the difficulties she was having. Is that kind of typical of you, or have you given us an example of somebody that then has taken advantage of lots of services?
It's quite typical, I would say. You know, I think this I did want to say this at the end, that this isn't a real rare sort of case study. This is quite typical, that not many young people nowadays just purely have a mental health disorder that need us to treat them. So I would say that probably at least 50% of our young people are similar. Obviously there were extra complexities in this case, but it is very common.
So I think you said that you treat up to 8 weeks on the intensive team. So would the patient normally go back on the waiting list after those 8 weeks, or because obviously Laura's carried on for significantly longer than 8 weeks, hasn't she?
Yes, she has. So it is based on a case-to-case basis, but it's usually 8 to 10 weeks. And when we say intensive treatment, it means with really severe cases, we can start with up to 5 sessions a week. So every day, Monday to Friday, and then we taper them down. We don't usually, it's quite rare for us to do 5 sessions. I would say we usually start with 3 contacts a week. So 3 individual sessions, and they could also be in our skills group at the same time. And then we taper it down. When we reach sort of a midpoint, we will get in contact with either our anxiety and depression team or the specialist community team to start doing a handover process. We start discussing the risk of the young person and whether we feel the risk would allow them to be on a waiting list. So we do sort of an overview of the risk at that stage. And because our other teams have duty workers and care and waiting workers, so we have to establish if the young person would be able to benefit from that. Other cases, we might refer to tier 2 counseling services, such as number 5 or number 22 counseling. And also if they're 17, we quite make use of talking therapies as well. But yes, essentially for a lot of them, they will go back on the waiting list. And then if they do re-represent in crisis, they come to us. Unfortunately for ITT, it becomes quite difficult if we need to hold patients for months just because they are on a waiting list.
Yeah. Now, thank you. My really final quick point is, you said that parents will obviously take their children to A&E rather than contacting our services. Is there any way that we can perhaps get the awareness of our services up better to avoid them kind of going into A&E? And then that's it. That's my final one.
Yeah, I mean, we've done various works. So schools also seem to send young people to A&E. If somebody mentions at school they're feeling suicidal, the school will send them straight to A&E. So we have done webinars with schools, for example, to actually try and educate them on our service. It's trying to kind of manage. We are also trying to obviously make it clear that parents just don't seem to know where to turn to, and they seem to go straight to A&E. But it's equally, we kind of need to manage the kind of floodgates in terms of you know, not having everybody call us, but trying to actually prevent those A&E admissions where we can, and we'll always respond so people don't have to go to A&E to access our service.
Yeah.
You know, we would much rather them actually just come through the front door via CPE, and then we would obviously see them the same day and avoid A&E altogether.
Yeah. Okay. All right then. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Martin.
Aileen. Thank you. Tamina.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Marie and Nadine. It's nice to see you again. I had the pleasure of joining your MDT a couple of weeks ago, and I suppose one of the things I'd reflect is, well, just how fantastic it was looking at that multidisciplinary approach and kind of sort of interprofessional discussions that you have about what are really complex young people with complex situations. I think a couple of my takeaway points there was how we can help you navigate our internal communication between teams and services so we are more joined up, and that it is, you know, we kind of hold the complexity away from the young person and their family. And then I guess the other one for me was how we can help you to work more effectively with social care, education and wider community, because I think with children's services, quite uniquely, quite a lot of the support that a young person and family might need absolutely sits outside specialist mental health services, but kind of young people and their families end up with us for a number of different reasons. So if we have complex behavioural issues, people responding, I think quite naturally, you were saying, to some really difficult life events, how we can engage more widely so that there's support offered elsewhere and not just kind of bouncing into a crisis service when all else seems to fail. So I suppose that was a long way of saying, is there anything more that we can do to help you navigate or bring together a sort of a more system approach to some of these issues?
Yeah, I think that is definitely needed. Essentially, we do find each local authority is obviously different in themselves, so we, you know, it is definitely something I think we need to kind of work on as a whole system, really, because many parents now will leave their child at in hospital. They'll refuse to take them home, but because they've self-harm, well, it's got they're suicidal, it's got to be a mental health problem. So we have a lot of battles. We've had young people stuck in the place of safety, had to go to court, etc. So I think certainly trying to achieve a more integrated response and approach would really be helpful.
I think a lot of time has been wasted on, is it social, is it mental, is it social, is it mental health, where it shouldn't even be the question. The question should just be, what is the unmet needs and how can we work together to address it as quickly as possible?
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you. Julian.
Yeah, great presentation. Thanks, colleagues. You mentioned a third of the sort of primary drivers have been associated with school and education. Just very briefly, could you just remind the board sort of what the offer is in schools? Because if it's going up all the time, what is it that schools currently have at their kind of disposal that might help them? I seem to remember we've got some specialist teams going into schools, but I don't know if it's ad hoc or not doing the job.
Yeah, there are the mental health support teams, but they're not, from my understanding, they're not in every single school. It's obviously something that commenced a couple of years ago throughout, and it's spreading throughout the country. So there is more support now in schools, but it's still not in absolutely every single school. So I think that having that service, once kind of they're fully staffed and fully functional, we would hope to actually see, you know, those numbers, you know, the kind of school issues, we'd hope to see those actually decrease. And a lot of the school issues, some are peer relational issues, some are exam pressure, etc. Some are not getting on with the teacher. It's quite variable. Sometimes a young person has autism, they can't cope with the environment. Sometimes really they're in the wrong educational provision if they've got autism. But yeah, we would hope it would be good actually to look at the data again in another year or so and look if it's changed at all, into, because it does seem a high proportion are, you know, it is school related issues.
Thank you very much. Sally.
I have visited your service, Marie, and I was very, very impressed with it. But my observation with the Laura story is that she had to reach crisis point in a sense, because you would have thought with that complexity of context, she would have been actually identified at the very least as a child in need, let alone needing a full EHCP plan. And the other thing is, if she had two parents who clearly, and one who's clearly got quite serious mental illness, where the issues are in terms of the adult mental health team, in terms of safeguarding, because if you do have adults and then there's a family there is a sense of, well, what impact is this having on the child? And I wonder if you've got any sort of observations to make in terms of these, what we can do from a preventative point of view, and whether there's any lessons to be learned there.
I think absolutely. I mean, when we have gone into deep dives with our sort of system colleagues, these problems, they don't appear overnight. They are there, and it's always, we do always question how has things gone on for so long, and their needs. I don't know whether it's about resources or people, other agencies not understanding their needs, but unfortunately it's a shame that they have to actually appear in crisis, and they've been struggling all this time for us to actually instigate all that multi-agency work. I don't know, Nadine, from that young person, are you aware, was anything tried earlier on through their life?
I just know in 2016, social services were involved very briefly, but I agree with what Sally is saying, because Laura actually started to self-harm at the age of 6. Was the first time that she self-harmed, and it doesn't seem like there was really a great intervention done. And my gut feel is it was probably, she's very young and there's some instability in the home, so social services should sort it out. And whether they did a short intervention and felt like they did what they needed to do, but from a mental health perspective, there was definitely not enough done for a 6-year-old that had disordered eating and was already self-harming. And then it was left a few years, and then, yes, like you said, she did come and present in crisis. So absolutely, if it was addressed at that stage, from a psychological perspective, for a 6-year-old to be self-harming, it leads to a very distressful home environment. So this is a good example of what could have actually been done.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Rajiv.
Marie, Nadine, thank you for that. It was very interesting. You touched on what my question was, actually. I'm interested to know what age Laura was and whether the data tells us anything around the age or gender or ethnicity of the young people that come through our service.
Do you mean the age that she was when she presented to us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just if we think 30. About the 100 or so that we get every month, the young people that we come through our service, can you comment on age, gender, ethnicity mix of those?
The average age from when I did an audit is around 15. We do get some that are sort of 17, and we do get the odd we've had 5-year-olds that have gone to A&E. Parents, it's all behavioural, often it's linked to autism, ADHD, so we do get both sort of ends, but generally it is that kind of 14, 15, 16 is our absolute most common age of young people that present.
And any comments on gender or ethnicity?
There's more females than males, definitely, quite significantly. Males more commonly will more go down the kind of antisocial behavioural offending route in a way, and that's how often they will behave and kind of manage, whereas females are more likely to self-harm. So I guess although we see more females, I wouldn't say that females are struggling more than males. I just think the behaviour looks very, very different, and they're more likely, males will go more likely down the offending route.
Marie, could you just comment on the ethnicity issue that Rajiv mentioned?
Yeah, I don't really think, we don't have a lot of data in terms of their ethnicity. I don't think there's anything surprising. I don't think we generally get any difference in terms of anything to sort of flag around ethnicity. I think in terms of the whole population, I would say that the ones that present in crisis are really kind of similar to what we would have in the general population. There's no specific, I guess, the people that we actually see more commonly than others, other than kind of psychosis.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Naomi.
Yeah, thank you. And many of my questions have been answered. And thank you for the presentation, which was excellent. How is Laura now?
She is still struggling a bit at the moment. Excuse me. School has tried to put a few things in place, but it's still not sufficient from our perspective. We feel there's still a bit more that needs to be done. Social services are quite actively involved. I think there will be a child protection plan soon. So we are still really actively liaising with school to find the best provision for her. I do think once we have a ASD formal diagnosis and a formal ADHD diagnosis, it is going to make it much easier for us. And I think that sometimes also delays things. Yes, we can go on a clinician's, their clinical perspective and their clinical opinion in terms of getting a CTR meeting set up. But when we have a formal diagnosis, I think it makes it easier as well to then start sourcing these placements or educational provisions for someone that's neurodiverse.
Thank you.
Okay, well, Maria and Nadine, thank you. It was indeed an excellent presentation and really thought-provoking. I take away a few things myself from this. One is about the importance of the underlying causes, which I was delighted to see you focus on. And secondly, and Nadine, your comment that we really need to break down the barriers between the different agencies such that we focus on the child and what's needed, and then we can sort it out from there. And then that leads me on to the one team approach for mental health, which is, trying to make sure we bring it all together as a single model, and we don't have complexity for the patient. I think Nadine, or perhaps Tamina said, you keep the complexity away from the patient. So for them, it's easy and simple. Working with partners clearly is an important issue here, and we know, don't we, that a lot of these issues are driven by factors that are not strictly health ones, but are driven by social issues. So I'm delighted the way you presented this. And the other thing I take away is the fragmentation that's still there, with different local authorities having different practices. And this isn't a criticism of everyone, it's just an observation. And I think we all need to work together with our integrated care partners to try and find ways of having a single approach to this, where all members, all different agencies understand how we work together in a single way. So, but fantastic presentation, really important work you're doing. And please pass on our thanks to your colleagues as well. Thank you very much indeed.
Lovely. Thank you for having us.
That's a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Well, that was a fantastic presentation. I thought really, really interesting. And it raises lots of issues that I know we've all been talking about and discussing before. So thank you for that. Okay, if we can move on then to 6.1 patient experience report. Debbie, it looks like it normally looks. I'm not sure that's good or bad, but I hope it's not complacent.
No, I was actually going to say, yes, so this is our quarterly report. There are no significant changes in terms of any new themes or numbers of complaints or compliments. I am pleased that we're still seeing improvement in numbers of the patient feedback tool being used. We have got a couple of areas where we want to encourage that further. Children's services in particular have definitely been a bit slower to take up and embed this. And for Prospect Park, although we're getting quite a high percentage of patients' feedback, I would like to look at how else we can gather and capture some of those experiences at Prospect Park. Obviously, our strategy is not just about gathering it, it's also about what we do with it as a consequence. That's really important. So we're continuing to work with services on that, and we're starting to see services are really looking at the data now and what they do with it. The only other thing I wanted to say is, obviously we've been doing this report in this format for a year now, so I wanted to check in really to say, is it what you want? I recognise it is one of the more lengthy reports, as most of mine are. If you wanted to just have the front sheet and us put the paper straight onto the public website, then that's fine too. I just wanted to take the opportunity to check in, really.
Okay. Could I just say something briefly, and then just in terms of Prospect Park, you mentioned that I assume that some of our patients will find it difficult for various reasons if their health to respond in a normal way. So and I did attend. I remember attending one of the sessions from one of the wards with the, they had all the patients there, and they were looking at sort of QI approach, what works, what doesn't. So there's things there, maybe more informal and less sort of, less formal, but nevertheless, there's real information in some of that, isn't there, that can be collected and
there
somehow
really is.
fed in.
There really is. We're just not, I think, as good at capturing all of that at the moment as we might be in order to use it. So that's, yes, exactly it, Martin, so that we can demonstrate that we have that patient voice and using that for improvements.
What do colleagues think about the paper structure? Any views? I think probably it would be, oh, sorry, Mark.
Yeah, no, the point, and I've certainly made this in meetings before, Debbie, and you've responded to it, which is it's not just the feedback, it's the actions that are being taken by the services that I personally find really useful and powerful, because the data is all very useful in terms of giving an indication as to how trends are occurring, etc. But it's the management response and the way that the teams are responding to it that I find personally really valuable. So if we can maintain that, and if there are opportunities to increase that, that would be great from my perspective.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Sally.
I find the detail quite helpful, Debbie, because I try, if I've sort of got my antennae up about sort of, I try and triangulate. Do you know? So I don't. I'm looking at this, and then if there's sort of issues elsewhere, how it comes together, if I'm sort of getting my message over. So I find the detail really helpful from that point of view. But I do agree it is quite detailed, and in some senses other boards might not present quite so much detail, but I do find it helpful in terms of bringing it together with in my own mind and trying to triangulate from other sources.
Okay, thank you, Sally, for that. Julian.
Yeah, perhaps we could just hold that, Martin, because obviously I've tried to respond to the well-led review, which is a sense that non-exec directors would like pithier responses. So I did challenge sort of Debbie around that. But listening to that feedback, it'd be quite hard for to necessarily achieve that. So rather than try and answer this paper, it might just be worth checking in with some of the bigger routine papers about what we can do, and then I can work with the team about where we want to get to rather than take it on a case by case. But I have put that challenge back into the team. But to some extent, there was almost can we have a bit more in terms of kind of what you do with this? So I do think it's worth just bearing that. It's a very, very common tension, Martin, isn't it? Between
Absolutely.
So if we can just check in on the papers over the next couple of months, then that would help try and right size it for us all. So
I think that's very wise, Julian, and so I think all of us, we set ourselves some homework, which is to look at the papers that come through and store away the things that we think might be useful to change, and then we can have a session on how we provide guidance to people. Okay, all right. Well, anyway, Debbie, thanks so much for the report, and let's hope we can keep pushing on well. So the next thing is Safe Staffing 6-monthly report, which is a formal one we take. Debbie.
It is, and also a lengthy one, I'm fully aware, but the NQB, which is the National Quality Board, are actually very prescriptive about what needs to go in this report for board, which is why it's got in it what it's got in it. Hopefully the summary that I provide in the front sheet helps a little bit in terms of understanding. In summary, we've got no anticipated changes to the wards over the next few months, so there's no changes required for us to assess in terms of different staffing, etc. My assessment remains that overall Prospect Park and the East wards have the right level of staffing in their establishments, notwithstanding the fact that we know that we've got significant vacancy, so we're not achieving that establishment at the moment, and therefore we're using high numbers of temporary staff, which is absolutely not what we would aspire to. The wards in the West continue to have lower than optimal and generally lower care hours per patient, and that is still being reviewed in terms of current establishments. We've seen some minor positive changes in terms of achieving 2 registered staff. We've seen a slight decrease in the numbers of shifts with less than 2 registered staff over the last year. So this 6 months and the 6 months before a slight downward trend, and we've seen also a slight downward trend in the unfilled shifts, which is really good, although again it's still much higher than we would want it to be. And other than that, I think I'm happy to take any questions really. Obviously we do need to note the declaration on page 17 and 18, which is as I've said for the last few years, it's safe. We can't correlate any particular incidents with our staffing, but it obviously is not optimal why we are using such high numbers of temporary staff. I probably should just add as well to note that a lot of those temporary staff are NHSP and do know the wards really, really well. It's not like agency where we may be getting ad hoc staff that come once and never come again. So that does provide slightly more assurance in terms of some continuity, really.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Debbie, oh, sorry, Sally. You're on mute, Sally.
Yeah, Debbie, the 8% sickness rate is a bit concerning, isn't it, on the wards? Because that's really high, isn't it, for those sorts of wards? And must demonstrate a level of, the impact that has on morale or burnout, and what we can do about that.
So historically, sickness absence on the wards is higher than in our other services. There is a lower tolerance for people, so people can't work from home. So if they are feeling a little unwell, or they've got DMV but they feel okay to work, or they've got a cold, obviously, or they've got COVID, they've needed to remain off work, unlike people that have an option to work from home during those periods of time. So that has always and will continue to push staffing sickness up a little bit higher on the wards. I agree, though, it's higher than we want it to be, and that includes a mix of long-term and short-term sickness. Our main reason for individual episodes continues to be colds, coughs, flu, diarrhea and vomiting. Our longer term absence continues to be things like stress, anxiety, musculoskeletal challenges. So that tends to be the bulk of our longer term sickness absence, and something that we continue to look at and try and address, Sally.
Yeah, I think my impression is with the 8%, Debbie, and I stand to be corrected, is it would make us an outlier in comparison with other inpatient mental health facility. I don't know. I don't want to prolong the discussion, but if you compared us to other 8%,
not particularly locally at the moment, as far as I'm aware, but I'm happy to provide a bit more info on that for you, Sally.
You can put it in NHS
Yeah.
benchmarking, Debbie, so we can just
Yeah.
forward that through. It may be on the higher end, but I don't think it's extreme, Sally. But we'll send you the benchmarking data for last year across all mental health trusts.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? I mean, there's clearly the general issue of workforce, permanent workforce, but then there's the risk of managing temporary staff. For those, you said a lot of them are our own staff working through NHSP. Okay, I'll be happy to accept the declaration. We are. Thank you very much. Okay, quality accounts, Minu.
Thank you, Martin. Good morning, everyone. So this is our quality account for board approval. There are a few pieces which we still need to add, especially the responses from stakeholders, which we send the quality accounts to, and our response to that. But this is sort of, almost the final version with our data narrative all coming together. And if I have to say, we've seen everything over the year, every quarter, but this is where all the data comes together, and you can see, the whole year's performance in various areas of our quality patient experience. So it's probably quite long to go through it in any measure, but I'm quite happy to go through sections or take questions or suggestions for improvement, certainly. But just to add that the National Quality Board, which publishes from time to time various quality standards, are undertaking a review of the quality accounts in general for improvement updating. So, you know, we expect something will come through for the 2023-24 quality account requirements through National Quality Board and NHS England, which will make the recommendations, but we don't know what that will be. And in general, the structure of a quality accounts is some areas which are mandated, the sort of 3 sections and certain data. The rest, we have flexibility of adding or removing sections depending on our view of the size of the account. So happy to take any questions, suggestions, Martin.
Thank you very much. I mean, as Minu says, this is something which comes through quarterly, so we've seen a lot of the stuff before. Tamina.
Yes, I have had the I don't know, the fortune or misfortune to write a couple of quality accounts. So I just wanted to reflect this was a really easy read. I thought it was well described. So I think for someone who's coming new to any of our services, it was easy to navigate. So I just wanted to kind of feed that back. And I guess there's always that issue, isn't there, about what you pull from the current year into the sort of priorities for the following year, and just whether we're really confident about the sense checking, particularly when I know we've got some new priorities coming through with the new divisions, for example, and some of our strategic priorities.
I guess it is the quality account for the last year, isn't it? So I'm not trying to curry favour with you, Tamina, but I did mention to Minu that I thought it's a very good read. I found it, you know, easy to read and quite engaging. So I thought that was a good document. I guess it's always difficult in these things to have everything that everybody would like in the document, but I thought it was a correct description of where we are. I was very happy with that. Any other questions or comments?
No.
Are we happy to allow the chair, myself and the chief executive to sign on behalf of the board? Okay, Minu, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thanks.
Executive report, Julian. Questions as normal?
Yes, please, Martin. Just move straight to questions. Thank you.
Any questions people would like to raise, issues?
Martin, one of the things that obviously if the papers were submitted a week later, I would have just referenced the change in council composition, which has been quite sort of radical across sort of Berkshire. So I recognise your sort of plea to the presenters of the meeting to have a sort of consensual view of Berkshire. I did smile a little bit about at that point, really. So in Slough, Labour have been in control for many years, and as you know, they've suffered very bad financial issues, and so Labour's lost overall control. So it's a hung council at the moment. So that's a significant change. Probably even bigger and seismic is Windsor and Maidenhead, that kind of made the national news, which has obviously been Conservative for a very long time, now moved to sort of Liberal Democrats in charge, and Labour have taken over sort of Bracknell Council in terms of majority, again from 20 years of quite strong majority Conservative kind of rule. I think I'm right in saying Wokingham Liberals now have consolidated their position since last year, which was traditionally a Conservative council, but it's been sort of no one with a majority at Wokingham. I think there's a majority now. Reading hasn't changed, and I haven't caught up with actually what's happened at West Berkshire. I'm not sure if they're out or not, but we'll do that. That's sort of quite significant changes, because across Berkshire we've had 6 unitary authorities for 23-24 years of different political persuasions driving different priorities, and now whilst there's some changes now, they will take a little while, I guess, to filter through, but it is the very real landscape in which we operate, and so that would be the only other update I would have provided, really, is sort of by way of context, which is very significant given our interrelationships and the changes there.
Julian, thank you. I was going to comment on that in the context of the governors as well, because the local authority governors will be changing, and there'll be quite a turnover there. I think it's one of those facts of life, isn't it, that local authorities are under different democratic control than the NHS, and however at times irritating it may seem when you're trying to plan systems, we have to work in a way which enables the local authorities to try and concentrate on those things which are steady, are stable, and don't have them, encourage them to change every 5 minutes. But it is where we are. So we look forward to working with the new colleagues. Anything else for Julian? Sally?
Julian, can I ask you that the reduction in the social work funding is quite dramatic, really, isn't it? Quite drastic. Will that have an immediate effect on the trust? Because social workers are, particularly in some areas, are just so important, aren't they? Are we offering training places, or other schemes that we won't be able to support?
So this was the social care in its widest form, not just social workers. So those who do, who may not be professionally qualified for training at every level. Will it have an immediate effect? No. Will it continue to have a long-term impact? Yes, undoubtedly.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? So, health and wellbeing update, Alex.
Thanks. I'll just introduce a couple of highlights from the report and just ask Jane to take us through with Jane and team's report here. So really pleased to see in the latest staff survey results, this organisation sees us taking positive action on health and wellbeing in terms of a top score there. It must be directly linked to staff engagement score, and again, top scoring around organisation as a place to work. So wellbeing is a really, really important strategic issue for the organisation, and just by way of highlighting some positive action around that, pleased to say that after NHS England and ICBs were not able to continue funding to the systems, wellbeing matters, wellbeing support to staff, the psychological services to staff, we've been able to identify business case funding towards setting up our own service, continuing that service, and to develop that as a really key component of our wellbeing strategy going forward. We tested really, really clearly for some time with the region and with our ICBs whether they wanted to continue a system-wide view. I think organisations will retract to deliver their own offer if they do that. We know we've got a really good critical mass and expertise with our psychological services to continue that service. So very glad to see that happening. Also, we agreed recurrent funding to the PEPI app for menopause and men's health. The feedback in terms of Net Promoter, you can see in the paper here, warranted that ongoing investment. So just a couple of highlights there, really, and I'll hand on to Jane. Thank you.
Jane.
Hello. So it's a lovely paper to deliver, I think, today, because I'm not going to go through all of it, but it shows the scale of activity in the wellbeing space. I mean, the question is often, why do we put such a priority on the staff wellbeing? And the reason that we do is because there's a really strong correlation between, if we keep our staff well, they're more likely to be engaged, they're more likely to be happy. We know that will lead to patient outcomes, and we also know that keeping people in a positive wellbeing space is also helpful in terms of managing sickness. And it's very interesting to see that some of our longer term sickness rates have been coming down over the last few years, even though we've had quite big shocks to to society, such as the whole COVID crisis. So, yeah, just to also mention that some of our activity here is partly funded by the staff charity as well. So we ought to say thank you to staff charity and recognise that they have made a contribution here towards the wellbeing of our staff and our staff's experience at work. So the report gives a sense of the investment that we've made, and to bring out a couple of things that we have done particularly this year with staff charity money. With charity money, we've invested in a staff wellbeing activities facilitator. That came from a request from staff to offer more activities. So that is both a virtual and in-person offer. So the Wellbeing Activities Facilitator has gone out to some events and run activity, yoga classes and so forth at away days, but primarily runs a schedule of activities virtually where people can join in, and that gives access to some sort of exercise classes for those who may not have the opportunity to go to local gyms. We've also focused on things such as staff rest areas and been working very closely with our union colleagues and with estates around creating rest areas and appropriate spaces for staff to go to outside of their workplace and their desk area. A particular area that's been popular has been the Pepi app. We've had the most amazing feedback on that. The Pepi apps are being fully utilised. The app has been extended. So we started with the menopause and we've extended that into men's health as well. And yeah, people at one point we had a waiting list for the menopause app because it was so popular. Yeah, we trialled this year, and this was on the back of the fact that some of our other local trusts, so Oxford Health, for example, were funding blue light cards for all of their staff. So that's again a trial this year. We know that the blue light card gives access to discounts for NHS and emergency services staff. That's a reflection that well-being can often be affected by financial pressures, and it was intended to give something to people to help fund some financial pressures by giving them access to that discount. And then the big thing that we have done this year is launch the Recognition Award. So this is recognising long service. Again, this came from the all staff briefings that we run where people had asked us to recognise long service. The feedback that we have got, particularly from our staff side representatives, has been that this initiative is really welcomed and has been incredibly well received. And I know exec have got very positive comments again through the all staff briefings and directly about this. So we have got a whole process now of recognition for people. I won't go through anything else. I'm happy to answer questions. It was really an opportunity for you to see what's happening in this space, and also so that you get a sense of what we're going to be doing going forward this year with regards to staff wellbeing.
Jane, thank you. Thank you very much. There's some great work going on here, and it's vitally important for the trust, to make sure our staff are as happy and well, if that's right, as we can. Any comments or questions from colleagues? Mark.
Yeah, thanks ever so much for the update. It was a really useful report, and I'm aware of the amount of work that's going on this. I'm also, Alex, delighted to hear that it's been agreed that the business case will be accepted. I had a concern that with the central funding being withdrawn, that some trusts may decide that this is an area that can't be supported. And so the fact that the executive team are going to support that business case and continue this work, which I personally believe is absolutely fundamental to us as a caring employer, is really good news. So thank you for that. It was really good to hear.
Okay, thank you. Sally. You're on mute, Sally.
Really good work here, Jane. It seems to me when you talk to frontline staff, one of the big issues for them is clearly the cost of living, isn't it? Do you feel that, when reading this, I get that the access to salary in advance, that's had a couple of, we're still working out some teething problems with that, and the food bank at Upton Park. Do you feel that we're being responsive enough? I know there's a limitation of what we can do, but given that's such a big issue, whether you know that our response has been robust enough around that.
I think we've done what we can within the limits of what we're able to do as employers. Sally, you may be aware though that at Thames Valley level, so across Bob and Frimley, there has been a specific piece of work looking at the cost of living in the Thames Valley, and Naomi knows because we came to FIP recently to talk about where that research has got to. We've now got to the stage where the research is nearly finishing, and we're linking it in now to what are the next steps, what are the recommendations that we would want to take forward at local level, at system level, and perhaps to influence national level. So that's the way that we're trying to tackle some of the wider cost of living issues, is not just through individual trusts, but looking at what we could do at a broader level. I'm very happy to share any information about that if you'd like to see that, or if any of the board would like to see that.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in seeing that, actually. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Sally. And Naomi, I think I missed you out by mistake. Sorry.
Not at all, Martin, that's fine. And thank you, Jane, for joining the dot, as it were, between the cost of living initiative, which is very bold. And I won't dwell on that because there'll be more to come, Sally, but joining the dots between that piece of work and the health and wellbeing report. Jane, my question was about recognising how diverse we are as a trust, the multiple services that we have. You know, it's all about trying to get to the places that need this most and are perhaps hardest to get to. So how satisfied are you that these initiatives are accessible, well understood, and that the staff that potentially need it most feel compelled and that it's easy for them to get to some of these things, or you know, to get to the ones that they really want?
Yeah, that is our biggest issue, Naomi. I think it is very difficult, particularly when staff are in ward areas or out in the community, to make sure that they're aware of what's happening. We have had one set of roadshows where we went out to sites, set up a stall and explained some of the wellbeing work that's going on and took leaflets out, and there is another plan to go and do some more roadshows. So there is continuing, you know, this year and on a continuing basis, the roadshow concept. So we will go out and talk to staff about everything that is available, and that's the best way that we can reach people, other than through our traditional all staff Q&As and memos that go out. And of course everything is also on Nexus if people are able to access and look at Nexus. But yeah, it is a concern.
Thank you very much, Naomi. Mark.
Yep, Naomi, can I just add to Jane's answer to your question, because it was the very question that I asked Steph Mokes in my monthly discussion with her very early on, in terms of it's very often those hard to reach groups of people that are the very ones that need to be the beneficiaries and won't step forward. And the amount of work that Steph and the team are doing behind the scenes, as Jane's just touched on, really just scratched the surface there. I feel very comfortable and satisfied that the team really are using a plethora of different approaches, communication styles, etc., to do that. So yeah, the team are very aware of it, and I feel comfortable that they're making progress on it.
Thank you, Mark. Minu.
In a sense, Naomi, thanks for picking that point up. Actually, when this proposal was brought to exec, I was keen that we especially go out to staff with protected characteristics, because there is a good chance that there will be groups of staff who may feel that well-being is not for them. There are certain cultural groups who may feel we don't do well-being, it's only white people do it, you know, we manage it ourselves. Or there might be other protected characteristics who might feel a bit constrained, you know, to go out and ask for help. So I think the suggestion was taken up when it was made, and I'm very much hoping, you know, along these lines, that we will not only support staff, you know, by raising awareness, but also aim to to be very much proactive with groups of staff with protected characteristics who may not be taking this offer up as much as we think they do.
Thank you very much, Manu. Very wise words, I think. Well, Jane, thank you very much. Clearly, there's great work going on, and we're grateful for you and your team. And we now move on to ethnicity pay gap report, which I'm delighted to see on the agenda. And perhaps you could just introduce it for us.
Yeah, I think
Thank
Alex
you.
wanted to say a couple of words on that as well first.
So just a heads up and introduction. It's the first time we're publishing this. We don't need to publish it, but transparency we're going to. I just want to head up a typo on page 214. The first paragraph quotes 16.75% of BME staff group. That's incorrect. It's per the figure 1 chart, which is 28.4. We will correct that for the publication. And in addition, just rereading this, we want to bring into the bonus section at the end, which is the group of consultant medical staff this applies to directly, not the whole workforce, just to set that benchmark context. So that will be an update. Over to Jane. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Okay, as Alex said, this is a paper that we don't have to publish, but we have decided to do so. And next year, we've also discussed the fact that we would like to do a disability pay gap report as well. So that will be our plan for the next year. As we've seen with the gender pay gap, this is not looking at whether we offer equal pay, it is looking at the differentials in pay. So we look at it through 2 lenses. We look at both median pay and we look at mean pay. Meaning average pay, the median being the midpoint, so that you've got a view of that middle point of pay and what so 50% will be above, 50% be below that sort of midpoint. If you were to look at mean pay, so that's averages, and I apologise in advance, I'm going to use the term BAME. I know that might be controversial and not everybody likes that terminology, but that terminology is the one that is currently used in the NHS, and therefore we have reflected in the paper here. But for BAME staff, if we look at average pay, is skewed so that it actually looks like our BAME staff on average get a slightly higher pay than white staff. Actually, that is because of the fact that we have a higher proportion of our medics who declare as BAME. If we were to look at the median point, we actually see that there was a slight differential, 65 pence differential, and that is because if we look at all of our staff, we have a number of BAME clinical staff who are clustered in the lower grades. And so therefore that is where the pay gap occurs. The answer to that is, and we talked about this in the gender pay gap paper, is that once we start moving above 8A and the number of people from a BAME background in non-medical roles are actually lower than white staff, and that's what creates the differential. I'm not going to go through everything in detail. The paper is there. There's quite a lot of data to go through it, but happy to answer any questions again that may be coming up.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm very, very grateful for the paper. Any questions or comments, please? Jane, I got just a question on your executive summary on page 210. And I think you've just spoken to us a bit, but perhaps you can just help me clarify. It got about the reasons for the ethnicity pay gap. It's about 6th bullet down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7th bullet down. Can be varied and complex. And it says one of the major reasons is there are a high proportion of white colleagues across all quartiles than BAME colleagues. And I just wasn't quite sure whether that's, situating the appraisal that the problem is we haven't got the right number of different ethnicities and different levels in the trust, and therefore that's not a justification. That's a sort of something we need to address. Have I misunderstood that?
Yeah, it probably could have been phrased a little bit better there. The reality is that there's a high proportion of white colleagues in most of our workforce, the exception being our medical workforce, where we do have a higher proportion of BAME staff. And that reflects the proportion of BAME candidates and applicants going into medicine generally, which is much higher. We have a much higher proportion of BAME candidates in medicine, which is reflective of the national statistics.
Rajiv.
Yeah, great to see the paper, and it gives us a lot of information and paints a story. I would say that it tells half the story, however, and it's a theme that we've talked about in the past, is do we have the data to show the BAME colleagues split out into Black and Asian separately? I think it may tell. We haven't got the data.
No, we haven't got it in this paper, but we can pull it out if needed for some of the major things. So if that's something you would like us to pull out separately, we absolutely can. And I can, without showing the figures, I can almost guarantee that what will happen is that there will be, we talked about it before, there's certain ethnicities that will be overrepresented in the lower end, and that will be our Black Afro-Caribbean, so Black British groups, and certain ethnicities, particularly in medicine, for example, where we will have a higher proportion of people of British, Asian and Asian origin. So there will be differences, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and I think it would be useful, and I think every time we bring a paper to the board where we're showing BAME, I think it would be useful to try and think about, can we split out Black versus Asian, because I think it does paint a very different picture.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I totally support that, Jane. If colleagues are happy, we'll. Yeah, I think we'd like that split out, because also, if nothing else, you know, the averaging, you start not to get prompted by the differences, whereas if you see the differences, you know, you get prompted to think more about why. So I think it's a good thing to do, regardless of whether we should do it or not.
Yeah.
Aileen.
Yeah, I was going to make that same point, but the other question I had, and I think we've talked about it before, in terms of we've got 2.76 of our workforce not stated. So I wondered, since we've talked quite a lot about analyses about different ethnicities, is there anything we can do to encourage our teams to actually volunteer that information, and in a manner where it's a positive thing to do, so they can understand that the initiatives that we're taking, we want to make sure that they are actually having the impact we want. Do you understand what I mean, Jane, by that?
I think what if I've understood it correctly, it's about how we get more people to declare. So those that haven't declared, how we get them. Okay, so yes, we have talked to the networks about having what we call a declaration day, where we try and encourage people to declare not just their ethnicity, but disabilities and so forth. Some of you may be aware we've got a network conference this week, and it is one of the things that we were going to try and discuss at that conference, in the margins of that conference, because yes, there is an appetite to try and get more people to feel comfortable to declare any of their protected characteristics. It hasn't happened yet, but we have got the commitment and the interest of the networks to do something like that.
And we obviously need to make sure that it's understood that it's for positive reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, hence why I think it's one of those things we wanted to, as I say, try and discuss in the, when we got all the networks together. I have spoken to all the network leads, but we haven't really socialised that as an idea properly yet across the network memberships. And I'm conscious as well that the network memberships aren't necessarily always the people that aren't declaring. They're the ones who are perhaps more active. Yeah, but it's how do we land that in a way that people feel encouraged to declare, and that's about perhaps explaining the benefits of declaring, both to them individually, particularly if you've got a protected characteristic like a disability, where we can help support people better, but also for those that where the declaration rates would help us to understand the statistics better.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just comment on that before I invite Debbie in? I have a suspicion we probably know enough data, don't we, to know that we've got a problem and what needs doing, and that some of the things about declarations come afterwards. That is, when we've solved the problems, people will be happy to declare. So I have a slightly contrary view to your, Aileen, about this, but let's fall out over it. Debbie.
I was only going to make something similar, Martin, and also just targeting the networks assumes that it is only people from the networks who aren't declaring. There might equally be white British people within the organisation not declaring. So it's probably something we need to do across the organisation. I would suggest, if we want to ensure we have a minimum percentage of non-declared.
Okay, thanks, Debbie. Rajiv.
Just very quick point. It makes me smile that we've got 2.7% of the population that haven't declared, but 15% of the board that hasn't declared.
Oh, right.
If anybody wants some help at board level, updating your ESR, please, what I can do afterwards, I'll go back and have a look, and we can help update board members' declarations for you. Don't worry, we can get our ESR team to do that with your permission. We'll take that away as an action.
Thank you, Rajiv.
Don't be embarrassed by that, Martin. Jane helped me do mine last year.
All right. I'm worried now. I should go and check as soon as the meeting's open. Okay. Look, seriously, this is a really important issue. I think we're all very keen to continue with understanding this and getting a bit more resolution, as Rajiv very wisely said. I'm also very pleased, I'm sure the board is, that we're going to proceed with disability as well, because my experience, having done something similar in my executive life, is that when you do this, you start to learn some things that you just didn't even appreciate at all before. The data just comes to shout at you as to where to focus your effort. So I'm sure we'd all want to encourage you on the journey you're on. Julian.
Yeah, I mean, with the same applies to disability. I mean, you could lose yourself in the data, couldn't you? And internal debate about where you start, but there's no. I think everybody would agree you can't just fix this overnight. There's not something obvious that we're sort of missing, and so I suppose in parallel with these papers, a proposal which is always going to be controversial because there's always choices to make. Rather than sort of going for a consensus and trying to cover all parts of the body, it would be useful at some point to have some one or two things that we could do that over time would make a difference, that perhaps within our gift, bearing in mind that there isn't, people often feel quite uncomfortable because it's going to mean leaving other things out, but there's a danger otherwise we just map the current picture every year rather than attend to it. And for example, have we got a problem with the consultant sort of pay, or is actually really that small beer compared to the lower paid staff? And I just think actually providing a focus about where we might go to would be really helpful with a rationale. And same with the when we do it for disability too.
Yeah, the big focus area, I think, if I'm honest, Julian, for both gender and the ethnicity pay gap lies at around that talent progression piece around 8A, 8B. And that's why this year we're looking at extending some of our talent boards so that we actually go deeper into the organisation and we actually understand, who are the talented individuals who could be moving up into those roles when they, if and when they become available, and getting people prepped and ready so that when those roles appear that they could be able to get into those roles. That's really where we need to target our support, and that's definitely on our plan this year, is that rollout of those talent, more active talent management.
I think I very much support Julian's comments that, and we have a session to our next part of this meeting, talking about strategy implementation and discussion about that. And I think there, if we can find ways of focusing on, the few things where we know we can make a big impact by doing something, doesn't mean to say the rest stops, but we focus on, and the students said on some of these things, we can pick out something and really make an effort to take it forward the next sort of year or something. And then when you've solved it, as it were, you can move on. So rather than trying to sort of solve everything all at once, it can be difficult. Anyway, look, this is great, a very important topic, great stuff. Thank you very much, Jane, for that.
Take care. See you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you. So perhaps we can move on to performance item 8. Paul, finance report.
Thank you, Martin. I guess just headlining this in the context of all the financial challenges that we've faced and the systems have faced over the past year. On the face of it, looks a really pleasing set of results that we're able to report for financial year 22-23. So we've ended the year with a 2.2 million adjusted surplus. That was 300,000 better than the revised in-year forecast that we agreed with the board and the system a couple of months ago, and 3.1 million better than we originally planned at the beginning of this year. In terms of what you'll see in the accounts, we'll report a deficit of £100,000, and that's just simply taking our adjusted surplus and adjusting back for asset impairments, which are obviously the result of the annual valuation exercise that we need to do as part of our audited processes. If I move just on to page 221, which is the INE, as you'd expect, given it's month 12 and end of year, probably just some numbers that are worth providing a little bit more detail to. So pay predominantly is the one that sticks out, where it appears that we've overspent by 20 million in month 12. Two things driving that number. The first is something which we've seen over the past 4 years now, which is we need to make an adjustment in month 12 for increase in employers' national insurance, employers' pension contributions. So that's an increase from 14% to 20%. We make a one-off adjustment at year end, which is funded centrally. The second adjustment relates to the recently accepted pay award offer. Two elements of the pay award impact on 22-23. That's a 2% payment to all staff plus tiered payments averaging 4% as well, both of those non-consolidated. So we've adjusted and registered costs of 9.3 million in month 12 against that. That's a figure that has been provided by NHSE in terms of what they estimated the cost would be, and then we've increased that value by 300,000 to 9.3 because we think national estimates are slightly under what we think the costs are going to be. Again, this is funded, but only to the value of 9 million. The 300,000 shortfall that we think we're going to be seeing, we've adjusted for and have assumed we'll need to fund internally. If you exclude these non-recurrent items, we were on plan for pay in March, and we'd finished the year 1 million less than planned for pay overall, which, given the size of the pay bill, is not a hugely material underspend over the course of the year. Non-pay has a £1 million increase in March. Not unsurprisingly, got a number of one-off adjustments, movements in provisions and year-end accruals, which are driving that increase. Capital, I think, despite all of the inflationary pressures and supply chain issues over the past year, the team have done really, really well to spend fully against our system capital allocation. In the end, we've spent 9 million against a capital allocation of 8.7, with that additional 300 overspend being agreed by the system and is being offset by system underspends elsewhere. Outside of system capital, we underspent by 2.2 million, but that's predominantly down to the delays in the new POS facility over at Prospect Park, which will be something that will be commenced during 23-24. And all of this effectively has given rise to a higher than planned cash position. So we've closed the year out with 55.2 million of cash. That increase being driven mainly by our higher than planned surplus and the timing of some of our capital payments that came through in month 12. Obviously, all comes with the caveat that this is subject to external audit, which we're in the process of commencing at the moment, but happy to take any questions.
Well, thanks so much. Any questions? Can I just, Paul, can I irritate you by asking my standard questions about staffing numbers?
Admin by any chance?
Well, I'm going to start. If I'm looking at page 223, so the staffing detail, which is very helpful charts. Right, the top right one, nursing staffing. If you look at plan of the last 6 months and again it's contracted, the gap is widening, isn't it? Every month consistently. I know that we're managing to cover quite a bit of that through temporary staffing, etc. But it doesn't sort of paint a very optimistic picture going forward. Can you just comment on that at all?
No, I think it's right. I think it's probably highlighted by some of the issues as Debbie's raised in terms of the levels of establishment that we've set across the wards and the level of coverage that we see on a day-to-day basis not being as high as we would like. I think there's probably also some impact there in terms of some planned investments that we've agreed with commissioners and just not able to recruit fully to those investments, partly just due to workforce, partly because we have kind of internal recruitment within teams. So we seem to maintain kind of a consistent level of staffing, never really achieving the planned numbers that we set out at the beginning of the year.
Okay, and then I won't do management and admin this time, but I will do support to clinical staff, which is bottom left chart on that page. And I just note that the worked hours has got up to very high, and it's higher than planned, but very high compared to the contracted. I just wondered if there's a risk issue here about the ability of staff to, work those hours safely, etc. Is it
not one that I'm aware of, but it's kind of that sort of band 2, band 3 staffing groups where we know we have a high proportion of bank staff than we do in other substantive grades.
Right. Julian.
Thanks, Martin. I was just going to go back to that point you made around staffing because it's quite nuanced, isn't it? So every year we're actually employing around 200 more people. So we are successful. So last year, we at the end of last financial year, we had 200 more people working for us, and the previous year 200, and this current year we're planning on 200 more people working for us. So the numbers of people working substantially in the organisation are increasing year on year. But our plans, obviously, often, as Paul says, driven by national commissioning, new teams established. They're taking a long time either to fill or we're, during the course of the year, moving people from one internal team to a kind of another. So it's quite difficult to see in a sort of graph, isn't it? That sense that actually we're steadily increasing the number of full-time equivalents working in the organisation, but never meeting our plan.
Yeah, I suppose I was looking at the nursing one that we started the year 1100. We ended the year with 1110 thereabouts. It doesn't seem to be much increase in some of those core clinical roles that we have, as opposed to some of the, not saying they're not important, but other aspects of our workforce. That I just feel there's something there that we get a gap, slowly increasing, and I recognise we're recruiting, but we're not recruiting, are we, in the posts that are perhaps most critical to us? Or have I misunderstood that?
No, I think you're right. We're substituting, aren't we? Because the nurses don't exist. So people are bringing in psychological wellbeing practitioners, other kind of roles and responsibilities. We've seen a huge kind of rise in. If you look at that team that presented today, Maria's team, the composition of that team isn't a load of nurses because they don't exist. So, and that's a brand new team. So that's probably gives you a flavour of where the recruitment's at. But we also could do with some more nurses as well, Martin. Yeah,
absolutely. Any other questions? Rather hold that one. Okay, thank you, Paul. Performance report, item 8.1.
Thanks, Martin. I'll take through just some of the highlights. So just start with 2 of the drivers, which are going to be retired at following this meeting before we head into next year. So on page 234, Falls. Again, reporting better than target, which we've done consistently over the past 6-7 months. We've now got 7 wards operating below their target, 15% reduction overall this year in terms of fall numbers. New technologies installed across the wards and being well received. So this is going to continue to be monitored, but will no longer be a driver. So really made the breakthrough that was anticipated in this area. Physical health checks, again, we're consistently below target. we're now seeing numbers above, although not at target, we've seen a step change in terms of the numbers consistently above 80%, certainly for the whole of Q4. Slough, which has been an area of concern in terms of the numbers, we've seen compliance increase from 55 to 75% in recent months, and we've got additional substantive resource in this area now. So again, some confidence that we've made the breakthrough that we need to do in this area, and again, we'll continue to track this, but it will be removed as a driver. Self-harm, again, probably just worth noting, apart from the notable incidents last month where we had abnormally high numbers, real step change in terms of those numbers since December, with target being hit again this month. Just jumping to page 235 at the bottom, out of area placements, we saw an increase in bed usage from 14 to 21 in March, which obviously drove our numbers up and meant that we bridged trajectory in Q4. And just two areas to note that we picked up in our internal quality exec meeting, and which we're doing some work on. Page 244, kind of an increase in number of prone restraints starting to come through above target, and on 245, the self-harm rates in the community, where we've got 5 months above target now. And again, we're looking at these, and these will be reported back up through quality exec in the coming months. But happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Paul. Any questions? Paul, could you just explain, just an information thing, on the cover sheet, do you use a, let me just find it. It was one of the metric that I wasn't aware of. Perhaps I take it outside the meeting.
Okay.
I'll take it outside the meeting. Sorry, I can't find it offhand.
All right.
Any questions, other comments from? Okay. All right. Thanks so much indeed, then, Paul. 8.2, Naomi, have you got any comments you wish to raise from FIP?
Just very briefly, by exception, Martin, so the item on the last FIP that hasn't yet come to the board, but will do in due course. There's a piece of work that we're participating in. It brings together our two ICSs, so Bob on the one hand and Frimley ICS on the other. And we've commissioned a piece of work with Sheffield University and Huddersfield. So there's a bit of academic content and also the support of PwC to do an ambitious piece of work to look at the cost of living across the Thames Valley, recognising that, ostensibly, unlike some other areas of the UK where housing and transportation in particular are rather less expensive than they are in the Thames Valley, there's a sort of a disproportionate impact on our nursing staff in particular, if you look at cost of living through the lens in our geography. So the presentation to FIP, which Jane led, but was supported by a representative from PwC, has so far done what I would describe as the sort of research component of the project. So it's been all about data gathering and analysis, a great piece of work, ambitious, depthful, in looking in particular at the real cost of housing, whether that's ownership or rental across our geography, and indeed transportation, whether you own a car or you rely on public transportation in order to get to and from work and in your general activities. And the bottom line really, and it's deeply insightful because it's very detailed and it gives real live data. The bottom line really is that it tells us a lot of stuff that we probably knew already, but the point is it tells us that information in a really deeply granular and empirical way. So there's therefore the what what does all that mean, and what are we going to do with it? So the next step in the process is to take that data and information and start to develop the strategic options, both strategic and tactical options that might be available to us as a trust and across the two ICSs. And that piece of work to determine what those strategic options is a work in progress. But it will, you know, the ambition of this is such that it speaks to the difficulties and the challenges that we as a trust and the two ICSs face today and will continue to face in terms of attracting and retaining staff. And the questions that need to start to be answered are, well, you know, how do we tackle some of that reality and think about it in a slightly more creative and strategic way? So without going into further detail, that work is going to, I think, come to a head in June of this year. So we should hear more in June as some of those strategic options start to become crystallised. And then we as a trust, and indeed in the context of the two ICSs, can start to think about how we might deploy some of those strategic and tactical options in a way that I think has a near-term impact, but also recognises that the world of work in the NHS is probably going to need to adjust in order to close that particular gap, in particular as it relates to South East England. I'm going to pause there. I'm certain that that Julian and others will have some depths of insight if they may want to add to things that I've perhaps left out there.
All right, it's an important topic. Be interesting. You're tantalising to know what the answer is going to be. But any further comments on that? No. Okay, thanks so much, Naomi. Can we move on to the audit committee minutes? Rajiv, anything you want to say?
No, page 249 to minutes. The only couple of things I'd say quickly are that we got the message from Ernst & Young that the external audit is progressing well this year, much cleaner than last year. So well done to Paul and the team for that. They don't see any issues with meeting the deadlines this year. And then RSM gave their opinion on the internal audit for 22-23, and we got a level 2 opinion, which is the same as last year, which is the highest opinion they've given to any of their clients this year. So we should be proud of that as well. So big congrats to Paul and the team and the broader team also.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rajiv. Well done, Paul. Okay, any questions for Rajiv? I'm glad that the external audit is it's going smoother this year, so that's it's difficult last year. Okay, then there's the audit committee minutes are there, and then 9.1a, the draft annual report. I've just got the front sheet because the report itself can't be made public until it's presented to Parliament. But we're invited to consider any comments you want to make on the annual report, approve the draft for submission to NHS England, and give the chair, chief executive, myself, authority to sign the final document, and delegate authority to approve the annual accounts on behalf of the trust board to the audit committee. Everyone content? Okay. Councillor Governor's update. I was just going to mention, as Julian stole my thunder about the local elections and the changes there, and several of our governors will not
Martin,
be. Sorry.
Can I just come in? Sorry, I left a gap, which I was a bit embarrassed about, the West Berkshire Council issue. So for the minutes, Julie, just say West Berkshire Council also had a significant change and a big swing from Conservative to Liberal Democrat as well, and that sort of covers off all 6 councils now. So quite big changes across the patch.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, I was going to just say that. So we've got the process the council to go through to appoint new governors and appointed governors, and we're continuing with the process of selection of the new NED to replace Mahmuda when she retires, and that's proceeding fine with our governor colleagues. Any other business? I just got one item. Okay, well, this would have been Mahmuda's last formal board meeting, and I think we'd certainly want to record our thanks to Mahmuda for, I think it's 8 years service to the trust. She's been an outstanding NED. She brings insight, compassion, and wisdom to the debate, and whether it's on her mental health roles or as a NED on the trust, and she'll be very much missed. So I think we definitely want to record our sincere thanks for all she's done. Wish her well, and I have a feeling we'll still be in contact, and she'll still be a useful mentor for us all. So thank you very much for that. The date of the next public board is the 11th of July. It's nearly over. And now we'll move to exclude press and public for the remainder of the meeting as publicity would be prejudicial to the public interest. So